And good morning, good morning, good morning to all of our listeners from around the world. This is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I want to welcome you to another edition of This Morning with Soulivity with my beautiful co hosts, Sheila Applegate and Teresa Greco. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Brian.
Good
And
morning,
everybody
everyone.
listening.
We've got a lot to talk about, and I'm glad everyone is here. It's another Hot Topics day here on this morning, and it's going to be awesome. But before we begin, I want to remind our audience, listen, this is an interactive conversation. We want you to post your comments, your thoughts, any questions, right down to our chats on YouTube and Facebook. And, we'll add you to the conversation so that your voice can be heard, because that's what this show is all about. It's about real conversations that will empower you every single day. So why don't we get to it? You guys had a good weekend?
I did. Cold, but very nice.
Right. It was very cold in the Northeast.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was.
I mean, goodness gracious. Teresa, was it cold where you were? Where you are in
Yeah,
Canada?
yes. But this week it's supposed to warm up, but yeah, it was minus 30s with the wind chill.
Yes.
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow. Wow. Well, we've got some great topics we're going to include later on, how to get out of the winter blues. I think that's kind of like important to do. um, and we're going to be talking about the tragedy that was happening in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to kind of begin something. It is the 6th day into Black History Month. Yay!
Yay.
Yeah. Okay. I was like,
There we
like
go.
waiting, like, hey,
Waking
wait a
up
minute.
here.
We're all trying to wake up, right? And when we talk about Black history, a lot of times we talk about like figures that are specific to the Black experience, but from an African American side. Like we talk about like George Washington Carver, or we talk about Martin Luther King, or W.E. Du Bois. We talk about these powerful figures. And today I want to kind of flip the script here, because that's what I do. I like to flip the script. And talk about a man who was a fierce anti-racist, and I think a lot of people didn't really know that he was. And his name is Albert Einstein. Did you guys know that?
No, I didn't.
Albert Einstein is like one of my idols, and I did not know that. Like, it made sense, but I didn't consciously know that. Yeah.
There's a great piece in the Smithsonian Magazine, which is something that I like and subscribe to, and I get. And this is an old article that I kind of keep on my computer, which talks about that he was known widely for his scientific achievements, including the theories of relativity.
Mhm.
But he was also one that never just stuck to the science. And so I wanted to kind of go through this. The name of the article in the Smithsonian Magazine is How Albert Einstein Used His Fame to Denounce American Racism. And it tells how he used his platform to advocate loudly for social justice, especially for Black Americans, as a target of anti-Semitism in Germany and abroad between the world wars. The Jewish scientist was well aware of the harm that discrimination inflicts and sought to use his platform to speak out against the mistreatment of others. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is he didn't wait until like later, like when he got really big, as soon as he got a little bit of limelight from his new theories that he introduced the world and he got some fame, he began speaking out. In interviews, he advocated for the end of militarism and the mandatory military service in Germany. He had renounced his German citizenship at the age of 16, choosing statelessness over military service. And while he never fully endorsed the Zionist cause, he spoke frequently of his Jewish identity and his fame to help raise money for the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, making him a very public face, not just of science, but of Jewishness. And so there were many people, even during those times, and because World War I was in the early 19th century, and then World War II happened in the mid 19th century. I mean 20th century. Um, there was this school of thought that scientists should just stick to science, right? And that they shouldn't talk about or have a public opinion about anything that could be politically driven. So, what do you guys think about? I mean, think about that just from the beginning.
I
Teresa?
think I think it makes sense to use your fame, as we see in a lot of athletes and movie stars these days that use their popularity to then speak out on other topics. I th- I think it's their duty to do that because their
Mhm.
voice speaks louder
Right.
than many of ours.
Mhm.
That we're fighting some of these same causes, but because they're in the spotlight, their voice reaches more people.
Right.
It makes and obviously with him, it made a big shift because it affected when he received his Nobel Prize.
Right. Right. Which is funny that you bring that up, Teresa, because there was a huge concerted effort by Nazi Germany to put pressure on the Nobel I think it's Nobel laureates. I think is that right? It's that gives away the Nobel Prize. Whatever that society is, to put pressure on them during that period of time not to give him a Nobel Prize
Mm.
because he had spoken out against like the war and
Mhm.
and all these kinds of things. What do you
And
think,
that's
Sheila?
oh.
Oh, no, go ahead, Teresa.
No, and I was just saying, and that's how you know that you're doing it right, because
Right, right, right.
when you start ruffling some feathers and you start going against the grain and going
Disruptor.
against the popular narrative, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, whoa. But that's exactly, that you're hitting the right buttons. You're hitting a nerve, which I'm glad that, he didn't back down from, any of
Mhm.
that pressure. He remained consistent with his message and pushed forth. So
Absolutely. And Sheila, you said Albert Einstein's like one of your favorites of all time when it comes to this.
Yeah, well, first of all, one of my passions is combining or helping integrate science and spirituality. And um, Albert Einstein clearly understood that concept. And when you
Right.
look at him, he's been combining that for a long time. So
Right.
I've always kind of leaned on him, imagined him, felt his energy with me. And I didn't really recall this part about him, but I resonate with him so often. I was like, well, of course he did that, because one of the things that I've felt in this position is that, as soon as I had any platform, I needed to, that power, that drive to like, we can we can work on larger concepts and we can change things through whatever gifts we have, but we have to also look at society and see where we can influence and help to move it forward. So, it's just one more time where I respected him so much for what he's doing.
Right. Right. You know, this 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 was just part of who he was according to this article. I'm gonna post the article in our chat so that people can actually go out and read it. Um, that it lasted throughout his whole life, that this wasn't just something that he did, it was who he was. Especially if you think about that, he's a 16-year-old citizen of, or he was a citizen of Germany, to denounce his citizenship at 16. It's a
Mhm.
pretty bold statement for being so
Right.
young.
Right.
Um, in the article it says that later in his life, during the deep days of the Jim Crow era of America, when other scientists were urging Einstein not to engage in public opinion, um, he stayed true to form. In fact, in 1931, he accepted an invitation from the great African American sociologist and NAACP co-founder W.E.D. Du Bois. I did not know this part.
Yeah, this is so cool.
Yeah, to submit a piece to his magazine, The Crisis. Einstein took the opportunity to applaud civil rights efforts, but also encourage African Americans not to let racists drag down their self-worth. He quoted, I quote, "This more important aspect of the evil can be met through closer union and conscious educational enlightenment among the minority." He went
Mhm.
on to say, and so emancipation of the soul of the minority can be attained. Um, he was a fierce fighter for uh, African Americans getting educated, um, a fierce supporter of the HBCUs. That's the
Mhm.
historically Black colleges and universities that existed during that time period. I mean, just an amazing, amazing man.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting that we don't know this particular aspect of
Right.
him and his advocacy, right? That we hear it so much in science and me too in the spiritual world. There's lots of talk, there too. But this aspect we don't hear so much about, and we should. So I'm so glad that you brought it to our attention this morning and we're talking about that because uh, it's great. It's a great topic.
One of the things about the article that inspired me again is, and I just want to point out because a couple years ago, I always was thinking about the correlation between um, the German Nazis and the United States and why our education was so focused on the Nazis and never let that happen again. And I always felt to me like it was like a look over here and don't see what's here,
Right, right,
trying to
right.
redirect us and hide. And as everything is finally coming to the surface for people about what our history is in the United States, and we're fighting to have that be part of the education system. The thing that blew my mind, and I first heard it in the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel
Mm.
Wilkerson.
Oh, yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was the correlation, not even the correlation, but that Hitler actually modeled the Nazi race law off of American racism.
Right.
And in the article, it talks about how he knew that and he understood that, and he was making that correlation himself. Einstein
Right.
was making the correlation himself and helping to bring that forward. So I just wanted to make that point because I think it's a paradigm shift if you haven't made that connection yet.
Right. Right. Well, let's stay on this. We're going to take a quick break and we'll talk more about how Albert Einstein was a fierce anti-racist. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
And we're back with more this morning with Soulivity. We are talking about the great Albert Einstein and how he was both a phenomenal scientist, but also a fierce anti-racist. And there's a great article in the Smithsonian Magazine that talks about it, which is in the chat. You can go check that out. And Sheila, you brought up some, an important point that I think Albert Einstein kind of represents, and that is this continuation of that racism and discrimination is racism and discrimination no matter where it is.
Right.
And that he, as a young man, seeing the racism and discrimination that existed in Germany and then Nazi Germany later, he could easily see it here in the United States as well.
Yeah.
And so he spoke out against it, and supported efforts to further the freedom and prosperity of those who were oppressed. In fact, one of the beautiful quotes that came out of this article was from a 1946 commencement speech at Lincoln University, which is the oldest Black college in the United States. It's the oldest HBCU. Where he decried American racism. He decried American racism in no uncertain terms. He said, "This is separation of colored people from white people in the United States." He went on to say that separation is not a disease of colored people. It is a disease of white people. And I do not intend to be quiet about it.
Love it.
Wow.
Brian, I have that quote in my notes too. That's the only quote I pulled out of that.
Yeah, I mean,
It's so powerful.
Love
it
it.
is. And it's like, this is not a problem for, oh, well, racism is a thing for minorities to fix, right? Who are Black and brown and other races. This is oppression. And so he's calling it out as a white man who's
Mhm.
privileged also, by the way,
Right. Right.
saying, oh no, this is not their problem, it's our problem, and we've got to take the lead on understanding it and correcting it and making those people whole,
Mhm.
feel whole, with full freedom.
And I think maybe if we reflect on instances in our life where we were also discriminated against,
Right.
or, for whatever reason, whether, for economic status or for religion or for maybe the community you grew up in or the clothing that you had. I know growing up for us, my parents were immigrants here to Canada, did not have a lot of money at all. My father came to Canada with like $10 in his pocket.
Wow.
And we didn't have the designer clothing. And, where my mom went and shopped at like practically the thrift store to,
Right.
to make ends meet for us.
Right.
And, where you might have incurred some discrimination there. I incurred some growing up just because I'm half Italian. So
Wow. Yep.
even that, I had my last name made fun of, and the color of my skin was a bit too dark in some cases. It's things now that, and then, as a young kid, you're just like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right. Right. You don't
Because
understand it. You're like, why? I'm just a
yeah,
kid.
exactly. We're all the same.
Right.
We're all the
Yeah.
same. That these
Right.
things, none of these things are relevant. None of these things matter. But all of a sudden, it's like, oh wow! And I know, Brian, you talked about that science experiment that got done with those dolls, which we won't go into again. But from very young, very very young, children start to pick up on certain cues about what's preferable in society. And I think that people don't reflect on their own personal injustices to really think deeply about how that hurts, and then
Absolutely.
try to make a difference to say, wow, like, it didn't feel good when it happened to me. How can I make changes so that nobody goes through these things? I think, Einstein was feeling some of that personally, for him, and use that opportunity to try to make a difference to other people who were going through some of that same discrimination, just, on for different reasons.
Yeah, there's a saying that I listened to a podcast, and he says often, "Don't kick down, always kick up if you're going to make a difference." And when you're
Wow.
talking, I think that, the United States is birthed not just in racism, but also in immigrants. And so most of the people here have a heritage that has had some discrimination, but
Mhm.
what's shifted away, I mean, slavery is such a different aspect. They still came to the United States on purpose, but the other people. But the important thing then is just because, like, to take that step that you said, Teresa, that if we're looking at what we've experienced, is that really important next step is, and how can I look to the people who experienced more or are still experiencing it and make a
Mhm.
difference,
Yes.
versus if I keep them down, then I'm at least not at the bottom, right?
Oh.
Which is,
Right.
so
Right.
we need to, how do we help anybody
Oh.
who's suffered more than us? And how do the kicking up is that making a difference, taking action, legislation, whatever that action is.
Mm.
Yes.
Wow. It's so funny that I think, first of all, we're all immigrants. Either we were brought here or we came here, except for the indigenous that were already here, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Number two, racism and discrimination is part of our history. I mean,
Mhm.
even in the Northeast, where we're talking about the huge riots that existed between Protestants and Catholics.
Yes. Yes.
I had that one in my own family.
Right. I mean, so, and then again, Teresa, you were talking about, like, Italians that came over. They weren't just welcomed with open
No.
arms when they came in to
No, they
America,
weren't. No.
And so this is a continuing thing that we're talking about. I mean, the African American experience is unique into itself, but we've got to deal with this stuff.
Mhm.
And I love that Albert Einstein basically said, no, 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 no. We're not going to sweep this underneath the rug.
Right.
I'm not going to just do science because that's my job, right? I'm also a person that does not like this this other stuff that's happening, and that's why I'm going to be an anti-racist and discrimination person, and I'm going to speak out for it in every form that I can do that. And so I applaud him for that. Applaud him for that.
Me too.
And so I just wanted to make sure that, that we started, this week off with a little flip of the script for Black History Month. I mean, great article. Please go out and read it. Um, and, and maybe share your own thoughts in the chat about your feelings behind his life, his legacy, and whatever thoughts you have about this topic as we kind of move on to our next hot topic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sheila, you've got another great hot topic that's in the news even as we speak this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I woke up this morning. I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but there was a giant earthquake in Turkey. And at the time that I read, over 1,300 people were killed in this earthquake. And I know Israel is already taking actions to send support to them. And, it's a global event, and these things happen. And of course, my first instinct is to send love. I've actually been watching, I've gone through 2 Turkish shows that I've watched in the past several months. So I feel a deeper understanding, or awareness of Turkey right now, and the power that that country plays in, the soul of our world and the history of spirituality in our world. But the topic that came to mind for me is, my first instinct is to send love and to see all the different layers and reasons, or not even reasons, but just the big picture of events like this. But I noticed, when I went on to Twitter, everyone saying prayers and thoughts and prayers and love and light. And I wanted to talk about what each of you or us do, what we mean by that when we say we're doing it. And then there's that second thing is, does that mean instead of action, or is it include action? And how do we decide how much energy and thoughts and prayers we put in? So anything around, like, what do you do when you see that, or you feel that, or type that? What does that mean to you?
Wow. That's a good topic.
It's a really good topic. I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, because I'm just kind of being with that, because I think sometimes when these global tragedies happen, you want to try to figure it out, like, why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And and so it's hard to kind of rectify that. And at the same time, there's I hold true to my belief system that there's a higher purpose that I may not understand, and that's where faith kind of comes in. And that, I do send out, prayers and love and light. But I think too, a part of me kind of looks for, like, where can I kind of donate? Can I support?
Mm-hmm.
Are there relief efforts going on and that kind of thing? Like the earthquake in Turkey. I mean, those people are going to be devastated for a long, long time.
Right.
For a long time.
Yeah, there was a picture of, I'm sure there was more, but the one picture I saw, it was a huge building. So I don't know if that was an apartment building or what, office buildings or what, but a huge building just toppled down into rubble. And it even made me think of 9/11 and how we still think about that now. And this is nature versus man, but man is part of nature. So.
And Sheila, I
Exactly.
agree with you. There are so many layers to what is at play when something like this happens. And while we were both talking, my mind just went to a whole bunch of different ones that I start going to and start thinking about when something like this happened. And I'm just, looking at some of the imagery now as we're talking about it, and it reminds me of some of, what I've seen happening in the Ukraine too. So when
Mhm.
you said,
Right, exactly.
with man versus nature, does it hit us? Does it hit us differently? Does it impact us differently? And I know we're going to break soon. So, I want to share some of the thoughts that my mind seems to go to when this stuff happens, to try to, as Brian said, to rationalize, what does all of this mean? Why does it happen? And, how we can get through it personally, and how we can help others to get through it as well. As you said, how can we help? How can we donate? What can we do? That it's amazing how when things happen like this, it just right now, stirs the whole world, because we have access to this information real time. Like, there's real time videos happening, which a long time ago, when we used phones made up of metal cans and strings, and then we hollered over the valleys to try to get messages, or we sent the dove out to send messages. We didn't find out for things for like weeks later, but now with technology, we have access to real-time information. So it's really amazing. So I know we're going to go to break soon.
Yeah, why don't we continue on this and talk a little bit more? We can probably get some questions or comments from our audience. And so we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Hi there, Sheila Applegate here with some exciting news. I've joined the incredible Soulivity team as the host of the new Consciously Awesome live show, where I will be sharing insights to help you discover your full brilliance and claim the vibrant life you deserve. So tune in every Wednesday right here on Soulivity TV to join the fun, and remember to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss a single episode. Have an awesome week, and I will see you on Wednesday.
And welcome back to This Morning with Soulivity. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we're talking about the tragedy that's happening in Turkey with the huge earthquake that happened there. And Sheila, as you said before, we'll reiterate again, our prayers and our support go out to all the people who were affected by that earthquake. So we're talking about specifically, like when these things happen, how do we deal with them? How do we support ourselves and other people as they go through them? And so Teresa, you had some additional thoughts that you were talking about.
Yes. So when these things come up that are so big and beyond our control, that it's nature that's at play, and we're powerless against it when it wants to act fierce against us and affect our lives with so much, devastation. But my mind starts to go to where are the beautiful parts in all of this? And I think we saw a lot of that in 9/11 when it hit close to home, for you guys, how the beautiful parts come out of it, maybe in at the moment, right? Because I'm just looking at this image of like people helping each other, carrying this. It's this one in particular. It's got these two people. You could see they're like in the middle of it. They're all dirty. They've got blood, and one's carrying this little kid in his arms as they're running out of the rubble, it looks like. And it's those moments where people rush in and start to help and move into action to help each other. And it's amazing how these events bring people together like nothing else. It's like all of a sudden, all the things that separate us don't matter. It's like the humanity comes out in all of us when travesties like this happen. And it's beautiful to see the humanity of it all.
Yeah, I think there are beautiful things that happen when these events happen and we come together, whether it was, even if it's tragic. There's another layer I'd love to jump up to, and that is, we say send prayers or love and light. And so oftentimes, because I am an energy healer and I do work in the spiritual realms, I will shift over to the energy. And I remember it was one of the tsunamis, and it hit strong, and I felt like I got pulled right into that higher frequency of meditation. And when I tuned in to all the beings of light that had crossed over, all the souls of the people who crossed over, there was dancing and celebrating, and I didn't find any trauma in those souls, because even though it's quick, it's part of our cycle of connection to nature. And even I've checked in or had souls check in with me directly after being murdered, and they are often more free and in a space of compassion than we are when we're left on earth. So there's the support and love that we send to the people who've left behind, And then this honoring and celebration of those souls who have played a role in something that's going to have a big impact on the world and the people around them.
Absolutely. 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 You know, I think both of you kind of touched on something additionally, which is we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, you know, we're hearing about this tragedy and it touches all of our souls at the same time.
Right.
And so I think that it's important that we take away that additional fact as we move through our days and as the people in Turkey who were affected by this earthquake move through their days, that they're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
and that the world will rally for them in different ways. You know, we can debate about how much or to what degree and all that, but the fact still remains that there will be a global relief effort for those people and reconstruction and that kind of thing, but that the world comes to people's aid during these periods. And so I think that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to share something that I had heard for anybody that is a fan of Abraham and Esther Hicks. There was a question that was posed to Abraham about, it was about the Holocaust and some other genocides that have happened in different areas, and the person asking the question was just so angry. And why would God, why would Source ever allow these things to happen? And the response was exactly what we were talking about, that there are so many layers here that are at play that we can't comprehend, and we can't understand, and we're all on our own paths and our own journeys, and we are all in our spiritual evolution. And that, as Sheila said, some souls have chosen to go at this time. Same thing with the pandemic. There were a lot of souls that chose to leave at that time. And in a sense, sometimes they sacrifice themselves to leave the lingering message behind that we're supposed to be thinking about. There was, an accident here of a Muslim family that got mowed over by this racist in one of those big, like, 18-wheelers that, it turns out after he'd been, at work saying lots of racist comments and whatever, and then decided to mow down this family. And then we had vigils, and
Wow.
yeah, they were just walking on the street, and he decided to mow them over. And he 3 kids, 2 parents, like, for no reason, like, just, and so on a soul level, that family, and it's hard for us to understand this, but on a soul level, that family sacrificed themselves for this message that we need to stop some of this behavior that we're participating in. That let's go back just to the humanity of it. And these situations for me bring up so much gratitude for my life. Here we talk about such first world problems and third world problem. Like, here, first world, like, just, oh, my internet's not working. It's like, really?
Right.
Like, look at what's happening in Turkey right now. And you're like, oh, or I've gotten too many red lights on the way to work today. Like, we focus on issues here that ruin people's day that are minuscule.
Yeah.
And it's like, when I look at this, I'm like, wow. And we hear about, it seems like nature's vengeance on us, with fires and floods and that are happening all the time, in different places. And it just brings so much gratitude for me, the safety of, like, my family, of, the home that I live in, and the community and the country and where I live on this planet, that I'm just so thankful. And I think that's another message for me that takes away is like, wow, thank God that I'm not dealing with some of the heartache and the challenges and the hardships that those people over there are dealing with. Instead of like, let's focus on these minuscule things that are ruining our day.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we should think about it, right? What kind of messages are we supposed to take away? Even though, yeah, we are doing our prayers and we're sending all of that, but how does it impact how you're going to live today?
Right. Right. Right.
None of us should be complaining about anything really today.
Right.
I mean,
Well, it goes
okay,
to
everybody's
gratitude,
dealing with
right?
their exactly. We
A
all have
sense
our
of
own
gratitude.
challenges. But if you're focusing on like little things today, I think that we should really be looking at this and really thinking about, should you be complaining about that, or should you be feeling more grateful for these little hiccups that you might be encountering today? They're just hiccups.
Exactly. Exactly. Any final thoughts, Sheila?
Yeah, I just I think that's a good point to, take it, and how can we become better people from any situation like this? I like that, Teresa. I feel like when you mentioned, the murder of the family, like that is that invokes anger too. So we can be angry at God or nature when something happens in the nature through like a earthquake, but when it's invoked from hate on earth or from a human,
Yeah.
and we need to honor all the levels, because we're angry, like the family feels anger. We need to change something. There are things we can change as far as weather and nature and how we treat our world or earth, but we also need to focus on how we can send love, because love is a powerful force. Healing is a powerful force. Shifting our energy to those frequencies is important. But then, especially when it's something that change can be made, and we need to look at how can we make change, where in our life, whether it's little, like, or not little, but you said donation, Brian, or
Yeah.
activism, like what can we do? First we do the love and the light, then we do the action.
Right. Right.
And I think that's
Right.
important, especially when it becomes something that is in racism and discrimination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the the it goes along with the principle of being and then doing. And so I think the being part is taking in the information of the tragedy and feeling what you feel about it, maybe anger, sadness, grief. And then there's a doing part that's both spiritual in the sense of holding those people in love and light. But I also think that when you bring that and you do bring something forward in the physical, by taking physical action from that state of spirituality, it just supercharges it
Yeah.
that much more.
Right.
And
Which brings
so
us back to Einstein. And that's
exactly, right? Exactly. Hey. So Einstein's like smiling down on us right now.
right.
Listen, we're going to take a quick pause for the cause. And we come back. We're going to talk a little bit about how do you get out of these winter blues with Teresa. So we'll be right back in about 30 seconds.
6 years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
And welcome back to our last segment for this morning with Soulivity. I am joined by my beautiful and fabulous co-hosts, Teresa Greco and Sheila Applegate. Hey, ladies.
Hello, morning.
Wow, great topics today. Really
Yeah.
good topics today. Teresa, you had a great and highly applicable topic, especially for those of us who live in the northeastern part of the country and in southern Canada. I want to include our Canadian brothers and sisters as well, because we just had this huge. Now, Sheila, was it a boom cyclone or something like that? In terms of
No,
the
they
cold?
didn't even have a name for it.
They didn't
Just
even have a name for it. Just a huge
cold with
blob.
lots of winds.
Yeah, huge blob of cold air that came down from the Arctic, as it does from time to time, and swept across parts of the Midwest and into the Northeast, dropping temperatures down to sub-zero wind chills. In fact, I heard yesterday that the coldest temperature ever recorded on the planet was at the observatory in New Hampshire. It was 100. I think it was something like 170 below, something like that. Something crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was recent, or that's just the
That was
one?
this weekend.
This weekend. Okay.
This weekend.
I heard something about the Adirondacks went to close to that too.
Yeah, I mean it's a place where they have this observatory in the mountains. I actually went there once, and it's known for cold temperatures, but also high wind gust. The highest wind gust ever recorded was there. So it's been very, very cold. And so, Teresa, you had an excellent topic that I think these people would enjoy.
Yeah, around this time is when this starts this starts to set in, and it's been setting in for for those people who love summer like me. I'm a summer girl. It starts to set in pretty quick, but definitely around this time when we hear we will have days now where there's no sunshine and no color. And then when it gets super, super cold, then I think it just compounds some of the feelings of how we're impacted by nature. That's why I just thought, wow, I'm talking about the effective nature with what's happening in Turkey. And it's same thing, that here we are being impacted by nature as well, and how it affects our moods. So the winter blues is actually considered seasonal affective disorder.
Wow.
Or SAD. So when we do start to feel symptoms of sadness, depression, that we might find it hard to sleep, lethargy, and which I totally feel that when things are a little bit slow moving, you feel less inclined to get going. We go into hibernation mode here. It's like the comfort foods. You just want to stay indoors. These are all real symptoms and feelings that we have. Overeating with the comfort foods, feeling irritable when there's no sunshine. That's really something that we talk about here in Canada. And I live in Toronto, where it's like, oh, there's no sunshine. And as soon as we get those days with the sun, all of a sudden we all just feel that much better. So also feeling down and unsociable, where we want to hibernate in our homes and not go out as much. But these are all different symptoms of SAD, of the winter blues. And so when we start to feel some of that, when the weather and nature's impacting us, what are some of the steps that we can take to help us to feel better? What can we turn to? So I usually refer to this as your happiness toolkit. What tools do you have in your happiness toolkit that you can turn to that will immediately help you to start feeling better when you turn to some of these tools? So what I wanted to open up for discussion today was, because both of you also know what it's like to live in places that are cold.
Right.
What are some of the steps, maybe, and if it impacts you, how do you feel that SAD has impacted you? if you do, and what are some of the steps that you take? And then I'll share some of, based on the ones that come up, what are some additional ones we might be able to throw in there?
Well,
Hmm.
I used to be sad a lot in the winter. I used to really go through that cycle, but one of the things that I noticed is that the further I went into visualizing meditations and bringing light in from source energy, that it smoothed out the seasonal depression. But so I highly recommend that. Like, there's different ways to receive light, and
Beautiful.
but on a practical level, I try to follow my cycle. I think that we are in tune with nature, so I may do different things during the winter, and sometimes the creativity is about writing in a cozy room or something like that. But we also have a happy light in our house, which is the ultraviolet lights that you can sit with, because we need vitamin D for sure.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. And anytime the sun is out, I make sure I go out, even if it's just for a minute. I try to force myself to go for walks, or encourage myself to go for walks if it's not freezing, even on the not so sunny days, because even if we can't see the sun, we can get the vitamin D from the sun. And then another thing that really makes a difference for me is I move my bird feeders up close to my kitchen window. And so that I always have that interaction with nature. I walk into my kitchen and there's a bird looking at me, and that helps me remember
Aw.
that the seasons are changing, not feel
Aw.
so disconnected.
I love that. I do some of the similar or complementary things. I was raised in Detroit, so Detroit was one of those cities where, like Teresa, like you, where it can be very gray. Sunlight didn't come out until 9 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock it was gone. And
Mhm.
so one main thing was make sure that you get outside,
Mhm.
um, and enjoy being outdoors. Um, when I used to work in Germany, one thing that I noticed that was different than here was their cafes and restaurants always had outdoor seating. And so it didn't make a difference if it was winter or summer. They enjoyed the outdoors and the fresh air and that kind of thing, regardless of what the season was like. And I think a lot of times what we do is we go into hibernation and we come
Right.
inside and we don't go outside, and we don't get that fresh air and fresh energy. So take walks. I mean, take walks and do things that are outdoors. I mean, all you got to do is bundle up. Doesn't mean you have to stay out there all the time, but I think that that's an important aspect of you know coping with the seasons that are changing. I think too, when I was growing up, there were certain winter activities that were winter activities,
Right, right.
right? I think we kind of moved away from that in some regards, where we try to do we're sad in part because we can't do the things that we were doing in the summer. Well, that's because it's not summer. It's winter, and there's things that we can enjoy. I mean, um even if you're indoors, go to a spa, check out a
Mhm.
spa, get some facials and
Mhm.
some mani pedis or massages. I mean,
Mhm.
ramp up that self-care a little bit too. I think that
Mhm.
that's an important part. But those are
Mhm.
some of
Yeah,
the things
and
that we do.
as you say that, the winter activities that I overlooked, like skiing or skating, or, like hiking, snowshoeing, find the things that if you are in a place that has a lot of snow, find the things that you can actively look forward to in the winter outside. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right,
And I
right,
think changing, it's all about perspective, right?
right.
It's all about perspective. And that we had a big dumping of snow about 3 weeks ago, and I was like, oh God, this is a lot of snow, and driving is going to be so bad at it. And I managed to get myself to the gym that morning, and she's like, oh, it's like a winter wonderland out there. And I'm looking out the window and I'm like, heck yeah. It
Wow.
is. It
Right.
really is. It was like absolutely stunning. And I was just like, geez, like I just was having just the wrong perspective. And that as soon as she said that, I was like, oh my God, it's so glorious out here. I
Right.
can't wait to get
It's
outside
beautiful. Yeah.
after the gym. And I just thought, oh my God, there are people live on parts of this planet that will never see what I had the opportunity to see that morning and to experience that day, because they live near the equator and they will
Right.
never have
Right.
mornings like what I woke up to. And I just thought, this is just amazing that I have an opportunity to experience so many different types of weather here in Canada, like all kinds. Personally, I lived through a tornado myself. So I have had the opportunity to experience, really hot heat, and then, the really, really cold temperatures and those rainy days and lots. And I'm like, I'm just so lucky and so blessed. And so when we change our perspective about things, that about the weather, about how we can't go out, or how about maybe more challenging, but even those times that it may take us longer to get somewhere, it's like, oh, I just put an audiobook on, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's taken me like an extra 10 minutes. Like it really always goes back to our thoughts about it. Changing our thoughts is going to change the way that we look at things. And just like I loved Wayne Dyer's quote about, changing the way we think of things changes the things themselves because
Mhm.
of our perspective of them. And so all of you brought up such great points. I'm just going to pick out just a couple remaining ones that people can integrate. So that you mentioned, the getting active, and that when I think about it, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. It's wintertime. What other activities can I participate in that I have now the opportunity to, because I happen to live in a country that has 4 seasons. Although I usually think that we have just two. It's just summer and winter. Because the spring and fall just go like quick. It's like, oh, we love spring and fall. Yeah, but they're like a blink because it goes from like super hot to super cold sometimes. But nevertheless, we have 4 seasons here. But staying warm, Brian, you said about going to the spa and going for massages, that keeping our body warm does actually make us feel better. So taking advantage of some of those warmer activities, eating healthily. So even though we want to maybe turn to those comfort foods, but is still being mindful that the spring is around the corner and
Right.
summer not far after that. And then, if we've packed on too many extra pounds, then we might be having some extra struggles when the seasons do start to change. So, but eating foods that are fresh, those, if we can find those fruits and vegetables that are more colorful, and they have more, I mean, they're higher vibrational foods too, versus the processed foods and the quick foods that we might get at, McDonald's and things like that. Also taking up a new hobby. So as I said, what kind of things do you have in your happiness toolkit and that you can add to? So always learning new things, engaging in new activities that make us feel energized, make us feel excited, that also can help. Keeping in touch with friends and family, although we may want to hibernate, how can we still keep in touch? And expressing how you might be feeling with those that you are talking to, that talking it through and expressing some of those feelings can be helpful, instead of just thinking, well, maybe I'm imagining them, or maybe they're not valid, or, sharing them with people that you can talk to. There might also be a support group near you that is actually designed for SAD. So you can take a look at that. and seeking help from your professional if you need to go to see a doctor or a therapist or a coach, anything like that, religious leaders, to get some assistance if you're really struggling.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Listen, we've got just a few minutes left, so I want to make sure that we tell our listeners about things that are happening with Soulivity. We don't talk about this part of our platform that much, but there is Aspire Academy that is available for you to take courses, do workshops. There's some absolutely fantastic content there. In fact, one of the free workshops is with you, Teresa, the self-love workshop with Teresa Greco that's available there. You can go to aspire.soulivity.com and take that course with Teresa. And Teresa, you're going to have more courses coming up soon, including some mentorship, life coaching. So that's going to be coming up soon. Just want to let people know about that. And as always, on the 1st, 8th of the month, Sheila's Matrix of Illumination is coming up. So Sheila, can you talk a little bit about that really quickly so people know what that is?
On the 8th of each month, so that's coming up on Wednesday of this week, I do what's called the Matrix of Illumination, and we gather on Aspire for only $22 a session. And I will open up to a meditation and a live channeled message. So that means bringing spirit in information in through spirit. And it is always pertinent to what's going on in our world or in the lives of the people who are in the class. So this time, I think it's going to have something to do with Black History Month. And the two beings that I have invited in are Harriet Tubman. And after today, I think we definitely want to invite Albert Einstein in. And, they have the choice whether to come, but it's always interesting to hear from different frequencies.
Wow. And there's two great ways you can join. The next Matrix of Illumination, the registration link is there, or you can buy an annual pass for a year long of great Matrix of Illumination. And you actually save, I think it's $20 or more. Yeah. If you buy the whole year. So
and then you get notified, don't have to worry about registering each time.
Exactly. Exactly. Just walk on in. Anyway, listen, we want to say thank you for joining us again for another episode of This Morning with Soulivity. We hope that you come back and join us every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern. And we do a live replay at 11 a.m. Eastern for all of you on the West Coast. Want to thank both my co-hosts, Teresa and Sheila, for joining me. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
I know. Until next time, keep on having real conversations with passion and purpose and create that life, that best life of high quality living today. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye.
See you next time.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.